Barry Zellickson, thank you so much for joining us on the Attraction Pros COVID-19 video series. Thank you for your time today. Kind of tell us what's going on with Barry these days.
Well, again, appreciate you guys reaching out. It's always great to talk to people, especially when we have challenges in our industry. It's good to hear what others are doing and share what we've been doing. And I mean, I can give you a quick overview to start. I mean, I know every state is different. In our state, Minnesota, we were closed, I believe we're on the 16th of March, but our state has been a progressive process. Originally, we were told we could open on the 27th of March. Again, so we were focused on that. Then it got shelter in place was finally put in at that point and put till April 10th, which is today. And then this week it was extended to May 4th. And so the shelter in place is now coinciding with when we can open the business, which is May 4th. Now, we all know that doesn't mean that's going to happen, but that's what we're doing currently. And so, you know, our process has been, I'm sure, is same as others, is okay, we got to close down a business. You know, what does that mean? And it's all been based on term. I mean, originally it was 2 weeks, so we focused on what do we need to do and how do we work it at that point. Once it became, you know, another month, and actually it was May 1st originally for when the business could reopen. What does that look like? And I'm sure, as with most, it's okay, what do we have to do to leave our building? You know, how do you manage, you know, what do you need to shut down? How much do you have to deal with, from food, attractions to, you know, all the elements, you know, services, the monthly elements, and our people, which was really the foremost. We communicated to our guests, we communicated to our teammates, we kept them on as long as we could and gave them as much as we could to help them going forward. We still communicate with them on a weekly basis, and as we know information and try to figure out where we go from here. So that's been a lot of ours. And then of course you have the backside, which is, you know, your business end. You've got the landlords, the banks, all the monthly expenses that you have to focus on, and vendors to communicate on how, you know, what does your business look like today when you're not operating, and you know, how can you negotiate, work with people till you can open and operate again.
So how has that changed throughout this whole process when you initially shut down and thought that it was only going to be about, you know, a week and a half or so? And, you know, how did the mentality of operating the business as the shutdown and the closures continued to extend, how did that evolve with that continually moving situation?
You know, for us, I guess it was because we had set up a communication pattern when we started. Again, we all knew that it probably wasn't likely that 2 weeks was the case, but it did give, I guess, optimism and a way to continue. So, I mean, at that point, it was just, okay, let's just hang tight and see where this is headed, and, you know, communicate to mostly our guests at that point, or, you know, events and things of that, you know, that where we're at. And then once we learned that it was extended, then it became a little more, you know, process oriented. Okay, with each of my locations and the teams, you know, okay, what needs to be done at that location? Who do we need to communicate as far as, you know, either events we have set up, birthday parties, you know, from our team members? What do we need to do to shut the business down, and what does that look like if we're looking at the date, which at that time again became May 1st? You know, how do we get there, you know, where we can, you know, go on idle and figure out what that means to be to us as an operation, and then how do we make sure we're setting ourselves up so we can then start again. And so it was a lot of just communicating with the different elements, you know, team members, and then, you know, what to communicate out to our guests. And then from that point, who's taking lead on talking to the vendors and the various elements to make sure that they understand that, look, you know, we're closed, you know, this is what we are today. We'll communicate with you, you know, as we know more, and share with what we can. And obviously, you know, with that came all the funds that were available and the processes for applications and all those points. So certainly wasn't a shortage of things to do. Certainly not how you want to spend your day-to-day operating business activity. But, you know, at that point, that early stages, it was all about, okay, let's focus on what we need to do to close and be in a hold pattern it is. And then I would say, you know, towards the end of, you know, early, you know, I would say last week or 2 weeks ago, it's okay, what does this look like now that we're closed to what would it be like when we open? And obviously that's harder because you don't control any of that. You don't control what gathering is going to look like going forward. You don't control what you know, how people are going to want, regardless of what the states or the country mandates. You know, what are people comfortable doing? And I'm sure depending on your particular attraction, that's different. I mean, you think of a velocity unit with, a ball pit of that sort, people were nervous about those before all this. I mean, it's unlikely that's going to be a top attraction going forward. I mean, again, all depends on how you manage and clean it. And it's getting people comfortable that you can do that. I guess hopefully the good thing is most of us in the industry, cleaning and safety was top priority for us already. So, I mean, and I think that, at least from the feedback we've had from our guests, I mean, they know that and know that we're taking those extra steps, because that's initially what we did in the beginning, as maybe most did before we closed, is step up cleaning and processes. So there was a lot of focus on that. But now it's like, okay, we know what we want to do for each attraction or what we can do, whether it's spacing or special queuing or, the new cleaning process or what we make available for our guests today. But, depending on what we hear every day going forward, that could change. And I mean, you could look at it from two perspectives. I mean, you can have the positive perspective that say, look, there's a lot of competitive activities that are not going to be available for a while. I mean, they've canceled concerts, they've canceled sports events, they've canceled, all the outdoor and other activities, now indefinitely, into this past summer. So things that normally people make a choice for, if we can reopen, that could be good for our industry. I mean, I don't know how many, unfortunately, people will be jumping on a plane to travel for entertainment. So, for local, entertainment, that could be a boost. Or on the flip side, how long does it take people comfortable to get together and gather as a group, and what does that group look like? I mean, are corporations going to be comfortable taking their, whole, companies out to a big event? And if that is, what size? So, and then, what does that look like within your organization as far as what attractions you have and how do you interact? It's probably easier in a mini golf setup than it would be, in something where, maybe an axe room or escape room where they're all, interacting together. Those are all challenges.
Yeah, and Barry, you really hit on one of the big things that, a lot of people are really, focused on, is that our industry is about bringing people together. And then what does that look like when people come back? But I want to jump back to something you were talking about in terms of communicating with your employees, because, you said that was obviously a big concern of how you're communicating and what you're communicating. So, how are you taking the messages that you're getting from, different sources and distilling those down to what you need to communicate to your teams on a daily basis, on a weekly basis? So if you could just kind of walk me through that process that you guys are going through.
So we break it down based on, we have a management team that we have a weekly, still have a weekly conference call. We haven't done Zoom or any of those at this point, but calls that we talk about all the elements related to the things we just discussed. How does this look like? What are we doing? What can we do based on these different scenarios? And then from that, we discuss, okay, when do we want to make the next communication to the team? When do we want to make the next communication to our guests? And how do we look to that? With our team, there's shift level managers and different, again, like with anybody, you have, you have part-time employees as well as full-time. So how we communicate to those different groups is segmented on what we have going on. There are activities, some things that have to be done to our facilities. So when some people we're a little more interaction with, because they have to go in and manage them, because we can't just leave them sit idle. There are certain things we have to do. And then on the general overall population, we have an email communication system that was in place before, and we use that. And as far as information, it's really more, it's not detailed. It's just focused on, this is where we are right now. We're focused on, like I said, just change. We're focused on May 4th. This is our new date to look for. This is what we're going on. These are the types of things we're looking at as far as, attractions that we can open and how we're going to move forward. And we'll, we try to update them at least on a couple-week basis, just saying it's still moving forward. Again, not in any detail, because we don't have the detail to provide. And so the more detail is just more at the upper level, and us determining, we have indoor, outdoor. So potentially, if shelter in place goes away, outdoor could open before the rest, and people may be more comfortable. We just have to, again, based on what we know, those communications and discussions change. And I think the same goes true with how you communicate to your guests and when to communicate to your guests, and as well as what. Because again, you want to build to when you can open, but you don't know when that is, but you still want to stay relevant. So, what is that content you put out there, and how do you keep them engaged without crossing a line, I guess, and, or knowing what that would be. I mean, we don't know today. I mean, we hope it could be May, June, it could be August. I mean, depending on what happens. So you don't want to get ahead of it and then have to keep regearing along those lines. So that, I mean, I don't know if that answers the question, but it's an ongoing process, and it really varies by the information we know. I mean, we've certainly let them know we've applied for the programs, and because everybody's heard of them, and hopefully that, we're not trying to give any false hope, because until we get funds and know what we're doing with them, it's a little more challenging in our industry like us. I mean, we don't, it doesn't help us to bring on employees if we can't open. So it makes it a little more challenging on how you work with that. I mean, I want to put people back to work, but I have to have them be able to do something too.
Yeah. What operational changes are you anticipating coming out of this from everyone's saying the new normal, and everyone's also trying to figure out what that means, and what's kind of running through your head as far as, all right, we need to make updates or revisions or enhancements or whatever it is from an operational standpoint when you do reopen?
Well, I will say we've discussed a lot of things, whether they're real or not real. I mean, and again, in fact, we had a call today, just with all of us brainstorming on the different attractions on what that may look like. So, for example, does mini golf have to go the way as regular golf? You have to fill the hole so the ball doesn't go in and take the flags out so there's no contact. How do you space them every other hole? I mean, as they come in, what does that look like? Do you, queuing when they come into the facility, how do you work that out? What does that look like? We do online booking. Do we go to an online booking process for how bringing people in? Do we limit the number of people in the building? Do we take breaks to, clean in between each, group that goes through? Let's say go-karts. If you have 10 go-karts running, you wipe them off in between before the next 10. Can it be 10? Does it have to be less? As far as how they're interacting on the course. The process, take bowling, cleaning the balls, how you set it up, do you, even arcade games, does that become more like a fitness room environment where you have wet wipes by the machines, and the person that goes to play it takes them and wipes the machine down before he plays? I mean, does that work? I think the other thing to keep in mind is, and again, and I'm sure people are very different on the spectrum of, how they feel about this. I mean, we had people call us last week to see if we were open, which, I mean, obviously, I don't know why anyone, where they've been, but, it's like when I used to have a Halloween park. I mean, people would call up, will my 7-year-old be scared? Well, it depends on your 7-year-old. I mean, we have a path in our backyard that is, it's a small, short little path. It's like a freeway today. I mean, there's more people on it than I've ever seen the whole time we've lived here. People have different comfort levels of what they're willing to do and how they interact. I mean, and so I think you just have to, there's going to be guidelines, how many people can gather and whatever that tends to be. And then it's going to have to be, okay, here's what we have. We have sanitized stations, we have wipes, we have, masks, we have gloves, whatever you think is appropriate, and we have that available, or you allow people to bring it in. And then you have to let the guests say, are they comfortable to come and play under that scenario? And some will be, and some won't be. And how long it takes that to get back to a normal, or if it ever gets, whatever, to your point, the new norm. Then the question is, can you be profitable running it at that process? I mean, what does that look like? And then can you work with your landlord, or, to revise your rent under a scenario that would make sense under that scenario? Those are all unknowns till we see what comes back and how long that takes. And, if that takes getting a cure, that could be a lot longer. I mean, that could be a year from now. Is there testing that, I mean, are there different ways? I know there's been temperature sensing and all these other, there's different ways that people, are talking about different ways to clean people, or there's ways to spray things and all these different things. Well, there may be, I don't know if any of them actually work, if any of them clean, if it's more of them, make people feel that you're doing well. I mean, if that case, open a foam pit in your entrance, let everyone walk through and they're cleaned off. I mean, I don't know what will work, and I'm sure there's plenty of vendors working on solutions that maybe will help clean things in a more efficient way or get people comfortable. But again, this is evolving, as you know, on a daily basis. And I guess, the one thing that I would say, and again, I think that's what's exciting when you have something like IAAPA or all the different organizations. We are an industry, and it's not like, I mean, I'm obviously doing what I need to do for my business, but I trust, just why I'm excited to be on something like this is there's a lot of people in our same, out there, as you know, in our same industry that are all affected the same way. And we have a whole industry behind us that are looking for ways to help us get to the other side. So, you know, paying attention, you know, and staying, you know, in communication. It's not just about your team and your vendors and everything else. It's also about the industry, because, you know, we've got a great group of people behind us that are looking into this and reaching out to find these solutions and fighting on our behalf, because again, we are the industry. With it. If we're not here, there is no industry. So, you know, I'm not that I'm resting that there, you know, whatever that is, but I know that it's comforting that there's a whole group, you know, behind us, that in a lot of groups, and not just one. I mean, in all of our industries that are in the you know, hospitality, entertainment, that are out there fighting to make sure that we find what this looks like at the end of the day.
Yeah, a lot of the sentiment that we hear, certainly on these calls and with other people, is that we're all in this together, right? We've all been affected in some way, whether you are in the industry, whether you support the industry, whether you're an ancillary business that benefits from the industry. You know, we all are suffering, and we're all in this in some way or shape together. You know, and a lot of folks are really looking for those opportunities. What can this downtime help us do, or what can this, you know, how can we rethink about our business a little bit? So what are some of the things, I'm curious, Barry, from your point of view, that might be a positive coming out of this, or opportunities that you've seen that you may not have had time to think about before?
Well, I mean, I'm sure our facility's never been cleaner than it has been before. We certainly have taken a fair amount of time in getting in looking at that and how we do that. I mean, and again, we've certainly, you know, not since we opened it, we probably thought about the process of how we operate our business and manage it under this new norm. So, I mean, there's a lot of thought going into that, but there's also thoughts about what do attractions look like going forward. I mean, you know, this industry is about gathering. So, I mean, it's challenging because we don't know what that works. I mean, I don't know, again, I'm not disparaging any part of the attractions or business, but, you know, VR, putting a face mask on, you know, regardless if it's clean with wipe, I'm sure there's a lot of people that will never do that in this scenario. You know, if you know, even putting, you know, your fingers into a bowling ball. I mean, you know, everyone's going to have different levels. And so I think, looking to these other industries and especially ones that work in the cleaning world and stuff that we haven't focused a lot on are going to be a lot more important to our world. And how do we get the elements that we do clean? I mean, how do you clean a giant slide, inflatables, the world of inflatables? You can't clean them, you know, they're not every time someone goes down them. I mean, you know, and so how does that work? You know, so that process of how you use an attraction and then how you clean it so that people are comfortable to use it. That's where we spend a lot of our time thinking on what that looks like. And, you know, are there other attractions that work that will allow for, you know, a little, you know, more, you know, again, we're about interaction and experiences. I mean, if we can't gather and do that in some way, then this industry is challenged. I mean, there's no question about it. I mean, if you know, if you're not coming together to have a good time in some fashion, now, if we have to do it in bite-sized pieces and be more efficient on how we do it, then so be it. Let's figure out how to make that happen. But I mean, you know, take even a roller coaster. Okay, if you're on a roller coaster and you're in a cart one after another, you know, if you're not in that front car, anybody going down is coming your way. So I mean, you know, what that spacing look like on that? I mean, right. Think of a concert, you know, or a sports event. Are you going to go to a major football event filled with all these people that are sitting right next to you? I mean, so when you think of all that, you think positively. You say, okay, entertainment is going to change so people are comfortable going out, and what will that look like, and how long will that take? So you say, what do you think about? That's what we think about every day. Is okay. And I mentioned earlier, I said we have outdoor. We're thinking, well, maybe like I said, the outdoor may be an indicator, because maybe that's something more people are comfortable. They're certainly out and about in our market right now. Can that be an indicator where they'll start and then it gravitate going forward? And maybe that's how we evolve and get a sense of what people will do. But I think I'm hopeful because I see people outside. And again, we're Minnesota, so we've been locked up in the winter for a fair amount of time. So people are anxious to get out. So, you know, but they're out there and they're walking around and they're, you know, everywhere. So, I mean, people want to get out. And the question is what size groups will that be and how do we control that so that it's comfortable for people to still do that in an environment like ours?
Yeah. One thing that that worries me about all this is things that we're talking about that even if the demand is there when we're on the other side of this, if there's restrictions that require reduction in capacity and increase of costs, particularly in cleaning supplies and labor, then how do we make up for that in potential profitability to get to margins and levels seen prior to this?
Well, there's a lot of, I mean, if you take it from challenges, I mean, if you take the family entertainment center business like ours, I mean, anyone who's got hit like we did, you lost spring break, which is probably the biggest time for most everybody. So you've already lost where a lot of people build their cash, going into a season. So you're already in a challenged place already. You look to the opportunity, the less competition, less choices for people to do. If you're, depending on your attraction, how you control that coming in, you just have to model it to see, what's your put through based on these new scenarios. And then you've got to go backwards to these vendors and landlords and say, this is my new model. And again, some people will work with you and some people won't. I mean, the challenge is, what else are people going to do? Landlords, it's challenging, banks challenging. If we're a fairly large size facility, and who's going to fill our space if we're not there? And I'm sure that's the same for most. I mean, it's not, again, that's not a good situation for anybody. Right. But I mean, at the same time, you have to create a model that works financially, to your point. But I think it's you've got to sit down and work that out, and then hopefully your landlords or banks or whoever will work with you to get to that. And I would say the same for our vendors in our industry. I mean, there's operational, monthly expenses for a lot of services that we use that, work under a certain scenario. Or you have to resize. Maybe, the size we're at today doesn't work and we have to give back a portion of that size. You have to be creative, what works based on your model. And the challenge, unfortunately, and I think what makes it hard for us in our industry is we don't know what that's going to look like. And we're not the ones that dictate how many people. We might want 200 people to come in at a certain period of time. Like, we might not be allowed to do that. So then, then what does that look like? If we're being forced to do this, then, does the government step in to help us in our industry? And because now you're being mandated to how you have to operate. So how does that, now you're, again, those are challenging questions that, again, until we see where we're at, they're hard to answer, but they're scary from a standpoint of, again, you don't have the control out of what you can do. I mean, I go back to my Halloween industry. For us, it was all about put through, because you're open for a short period of time for basically a month, and you had to, get so many people through your facility to be successful. I mean, so this certainly puts us more in that world if we're allowed only to get so many people through, and we have, whatever our operating expenses are to run, and that doesn't match up. That's a concern.
Barry, I'm curious. You mentioned a couple of times your time in the hunt industry, and so you've got a varied background in lots of different businesses. I'm curious if you potentially see sort of a level set, as we go forward. Whereas we're talking about paying rent at a certain price. Well, that may be dependent on the amount of business you have, and then what vendors are going to charge, and obviously prices keep going up and up and up in a lot of areas. So do you maybe anticipate that things will kind of settle based on well, this is all I can get for that property, and then that affects what people charge, and you know what I'm saying? Like, do you
I think there's going to be some. I mean, I think listen, people have done that over many times. I mean, they go to percentage rents, they go to there's different ways to address that. And it's just like any surge in any market. Real estate gets expensive, it goes less expensive based on supply and demand and what you can do. I mean, if there was someone that could step up and replace us today, our landlord would do it in a heartbeat, I'm sure, because he's not getting revenue from something that's not operating. You talk about the Halloween industry. I mean, I was operating that with 9/11. I mean, so no one was very interested in going out and seeing horror after 9/11, and that industry suffered dramatically during that year, and obviously took some time to come back, but it did. And I think you'll there's a lot of factors that will come into this. This is a little more challenging because, again, it's mandated from a lot of different places, from the federal government, from your local state, from then people's impressions on what it takes, what they're comfortable with, and going back to address, the good news is that when you're talking with any vendor or landlord or anyone, it's not like this is a surprise. This is, we're not the only industry affected. I mean, so that's the other thing too. I mean, everybody's affected with this. And now, obviously restaurants equally, will people go out and dine in larger groups, or is it just going to be, focused on more of carry out, takeout, and what will it take to build back that dining, restaurant? Will it work from fine dining to casual to, fast casual, to just quick service? I mean, all those are affected in different ways. And like I said, each industry and the vendors that are associated with it are going to have to find a balance, because whatever options they had to, think of retail. I mean, or even go to the big box. Hospitality was the solution for all the empty big box stores. Well, we're not the solution anymore. So at least, for now. So what happens with all that space that everyone was looking to our industry to fill? So obviously there's an evolution that's going to happen. And there has to be adjustments to balance it out, because they're still going to need to generate revenue, and it just has to be under a new model.
Yeah. Lots to think about there.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's no question. I mean, and it's hard. I mean, I can't, I feel bad for my team. I'm sure every one of these industries have worked with people, for a long time in an industry we love. And, it's hard when you can't tell people what's next. I mean, I'm sure everybody, any business operator is going to say, it's not like, it's one thing if you're just a struggling business and, okay, we're doing these different things to cut expenses and, what to do to drive revenue. I mean, you don't even get there today. That's still going to be what you have to deal with it when you get to the other side of this. And the trouble is, you don't know what the other side of this is. So you can't even begin solving for those problems till you know what, we can do as an industry to open again. And that's what's challenging. So even if we were told we can open May 4th, like we are today, I don't, what is that? When could we really open, knowing that's the date? And what does that look like? Because again, we can't just open like we did before. I mean, we're not going to have all these, people coming into our facility, or assuming that we're not allowed to have all these people come into our facility. So like I said, I think I just think listening and participating in conversations with inside and outside our industry are important, because you just hear a lot of different things. You never know where ideas would come from. And I think, again, cleanliness is going to be key, and figuring out how to, clean the attractions that we have in our industry are going to be key. How to deal with the flow of, people coming in and out of the facilities are going to be key. But, at the end of the day, it still comes in, are you and your family going to come out and play or not? And I don't know that just because people are, more comfortable shopping online now or being at home, I don't think that's going to change their desire to do it. It's just when it becomes socially acceptable and safe to do it.
Well, Barry, thank you. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been a really interesting conversation, and we very much appreciate you doing this.
Well, I appreciate you asking, and I look forward to finding out what all the answers are when someone figures it out down the road. But I'll be anxious to try new things when we learn what they are.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Barry, and hope you stay safe. Hope your family is safe, and be well. And we look forward to seeing you on the other side of this.
All right. Same here, guys. Take care.